Elira had never felt so alone in her life. Though she was a princess, with a palace full of attendants and guards, her heart was empty. Suitors had once filled her court, offering promises of loyalty and power. They brought gifts of rare metals, jewels from dying stars, and words that sounded sweet but carried no warmth. One by one, they looked upon her small frame, her quiet voice, and turned away. They called her fragile. They called her weak. Some even laughed softly when they thought she could not hear. But she heard. She always heard. Elira told herself she did not need them. She told herself she was stronger than the sting of rejection. And yet, when she walked through the palace halls at night, the silence pressed against her chest like an invisible weight. What she missed most was not love, not marriage, not titles. What she missed was simple, the feeling of being understood, the feeling of someone listening when she spoke. And once, long ago, she had known that feeling. She remembered the human envoy, Daniel. He had not been like the others. When he first arrived at her father's court, most saw him as strange. Humans were rough in their ways, not as refined as the noble races of the empire. But Daniel's eyes were calm, and his smile was not forced. He had spoken to her as though she mattered, not as though she were just another royal burden. He had asked her questions no one else cared about. What do you like to read? What dreams do you have beyond the throne? Do you enjoy the stars, or the gardens, or the silence most? For the first time in years, Elira had laughed. Truly laughed. But that was cycles ago. Daniel had returned to his homeworld, and she had not seen him since at first. She thought he might send a message, a letter across the stars. She checked her console every day, waiting for a sign. But nothing came. The silence of space stretched long and merciless. Still, she held on to the memory. Yet lately, the weight of rejection made her wonder if even Daniel had forgotten her. The days moved slowly. Elira walked through the starlit gardens at night, where flowers glowed faintly blue, carrying the soft fragrance of alien soil. She touched the petals, but her heart remained heavy. Why am I not enough? She whispered to the quiet air. The stars above blinked, silent, offering no answer. She thought of Daniel. Maybe he had moved on, found someone else to speak with. Someone braver, taller, stronger. Humans were said to be bold, full of energy and life. Why would he remember a quiet princess who never quite fit in? And yet, she could not let go. Her heart told her there had been something real in his gaze, something steady. It had not been like the shallow looks of alien suitors. Daniel had seen her, not the title, not the crown, but her. That memory was her anchor. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the court only grew colder. Her father spoke of alliances. Her advisers whispered of treaties. But the princess, who could not win a husband, became a symbol of weakness to rival houses. She overheard them, always in whispers. She is too small. She is not fit for rule. Perhaps another should inherit. Each word cut, sharper than a blade. And still, in her heart, she remembered one man. One human. One evening, she returned to her chambers and sat by the wide crystal window. Outside, the stars stretched endless, scattered across the void. She placed her hand against the glass, as though she could reach across the galaxy and touch him. Daniel, she whispered, voice breaking, do you remember me? Or am I just a shadow now? A single tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it quickly, ashamed of her own weakness. But then, something stirred within her. Humans were different. She had seen it in Daniel's eyes. They were stubborn. They held on to hope, even when the universe said no. She remembered his stories. Of his people of climbing mountains they should not have survived. Of sailing seas that seemed endless. Of standing up when the world pressed them down. If humans could do that, then perhaps she could too. Perhaps she could find a way to reach across the stars. She did not know how. She did not have the courage yet. But the seed of hope was there, fragile but alive. And though she felt distant, though she felt forgotten, she whispered to herself, "One day, I will find a way to reconnect." Because deep inside, she believed that across the galaxy, all alien males may have rejected her, but one human still stood apart. Asterisk Alira sat by the crystal window night after night, staring at the stars. They seemed endless, scattered like broken diamonds across the black. Each one burned with life, with worlds, with people who went about their days without knowing her sadness. But for Alira, only one star mattered. Somewhere out there was Earth, Daniel's home. She did not know which star was his, but she knew it was shining. And every time she looked out, she whispered to herself, "He is under the same stars." That thought was her comfort, yet the comfort was fragile. The palace was colder now. Courtiers spoke less kindly, as though rejection had marked her as lesser. Every banquet, every council, every quiet walk through the halls reminded her that she was different, unwanted. And so, Daniel became more than just a memory. He became her symbol of hope, the proof that someone once had seen her, but he was gone. The ache of distance grew sharper each day. Li remembered their last conversation before he left. They had walked together in the starlit garden, where the glowing flowers swayed in the night breeze. "Do not let their words define you," he had said, voice calm, steady. "Sometimes the smallest person carries the strongest strength. Remember that." She had nodded, though she had not fully believed him at the time. Then he had bowed, smiled softly, and returned to his ship. She had watched the human vessel rise into the sky, its engines a faint glow in the distance, until it vanished among the stars. She had thought he would write. She had thought he would remember Dot, but silence had followed. And silence was the hardest thing of all. Many times she wanted to send a message. She would sit at her console, fingers hovering over the keys, heart racing. She even typed words once. "Dear Daniel, I hope you are well. Do you remember our walks in the garden? I miss those talks." But she erased them. What if he did not remember? What if she was only a fleeting memory to him? Her courage failed her each time. Still, she kept trying. That was the strange thing about humans, she thought. From his stories, she had learned that they did not give up easily. They climbed mountains, crossed deserts, sailed endless oceans, all because they believed there was something waiting at the end. She wanted to be like that. She wanted to hold on, even when the silence felt unbearable. One evening, she found herself in the archives of the palace. The halls were lined with ancient texts and glowing records, telling the long history of her people. She had come here often as a child, hiding among the shelves when the world felt too heavy. Now, she wandered aimlessly until she stopped before a screen that displayed old star maps. She touched the glass, and the galaxy unfolded in shining lines. Her eyes searched for Earth. After a long pause, she found it, marked faintly on the edge of the chart. Such a small world, circling a small star. And yet, from that world came Daniel, someone who had seen her when no one else had. She felt tears sting her eyes. "So far," she whispered. But even across such distance, she felt hope stir. If humans could cross endless oceans, could she not cross this distance too? The thought grew stronger in her heart. For days she carried it, like a flame she was afraid to let burn out. Every rejection, every cruel whisper in the palace only made her hold it tighter. Still, she did not know what to do. She could not leave the Empire. Her duty bound her here. And she could not simply send her heart across the stars. But maybe there was another way. One night, as she stood in the garden, she remembered something Daniel had once told her. When humans feel far from the people they love, they look at the sky. We call it the same moon, the same stars. It reminds us that no matter how far apart we are, we share the same light. Elira tilted her head back. Above, the moon of her homeworld hung pale and glowing. She thought of Earth's moon, shining far away. For the first time in months, she smiled. If Daniel ever looked up at his moon, maybe he would think of her too. The days ahead were still heavy, but hope was no longer gone. She began writing again, not messages to send, but letters she kept hidden in a small box under her bed. She poured her heart into them. Dear Daniel, today the courtiers whispered again, but I remembered your words and stood tall. Dear Daniel, the stars were bright tonight. I thought of you beneath them. Dear Daniel, I feel far away, but I believe we will meet again. Each letter gave her strength, even if he never read them. And then something shifted. During a council meeting, when the voices of generals and nobles grew loud, arguing over a problem, Elira spoke. Her voice was quiet, but her words were clear. She offered a simple idea no one had thought of. The room fell silent. For the first time, her father's eyes softened with respect. She left the chamber that day with her heart beating fast. She had spoken. She had been heard, and she realized perhaps this was what Daniel meant all along. The strength of the small voice, the power of being seen. That night, she wrote one last letter. Dear Daniel, I do not know when I will see you again, but I will keep walking forward, because that is what humans do. They do not give up. They believe. And so will I. Across the galaxy, even if all others reject me, I know one human once stood apart. And that will be enough to carry me until we meet again. She sealed the letter, placed it with the others, and held the box close to her. Elira's hidden letters were growing in number. She had written dozens now, each one a quiet message to Daniel. They filled the little wooden box she kept under her bed, stacked neatly, sealed with her careful hand. Every letter began the same. Dear Daniel. She wrote of her days, of her struggles, of the quiet moments that made her think of him. She wrote when she was sad, and she wrote when she found strength. And though no reply ever came, writing made her feel closer to him, as if her words could carry through the void, even without ships or signals. The ache of distance remained. Every time she looked at the stars, her heart whispered the same. Question: how do I reach him? One morning, she sat in the council chamber, surrounded by her father's advisors. They spoke of trade routes, treaties, and fleets. Their voices were sharp and cold, like blades clashing in battle. Elira listened. Quietly, her mind far away. She thought of Earth, of the little blue world Daniel had described with such warmth. Oceans, forests, and skies so wide they seemed endless. She imagined him walking under his sky at that very moment, unaware that she thought of him. The thought made her chest tighten. When the meeting ended, she slipped away to the palace archives. Again, she sat before the glowing star map, her eyes fixed on the small mark where Earth was drawn. So far, she whispered again, but this time, she did not stop there. She opened a console and began searching through the records. She wanted to know how humans sent messages across space. She found reports of human technology, simpler than her people's, but creative, stubbornly effective. Humans had signals into the void long before they had ships to chase them. They had believed their voices might one day be heard. Elira felt something stir inside her. If they could send voices into the dark, maybe I can too. That night, she carried her box of letters to her window. She laid them out carefully, reading a few again. Dear Daniel, today the stars were bright. I thought of you beneath them. Dear Daniel, they whispered again, but I stood tall. Dear Daniel, I will keep walking forward. She smiled faintly, though her eyes were wet. Maybe I cannot send these, she whispered, but maybe I can send my voice. It was a small idea, fragile and uncertain. But hope often began small. Over the next weeks, Elira worked in secret. She visited the old communication halls, where ancient transmitters sat unused. She studied them late at night, her hands brushing dust from forgotten panels. The machines hummed faintly when she powered them, their lights flickering to life after long silence. It was not forbidden for her to use them, but no one cared for such outdated tools. They were weak compared to modern channels, unable to carry secure diplomatic codes. But perhaps that weakness was a gift. The messages might slip through unnoticed, quiet as whispers, reaching places even her father's court did not watch. She practiced speaking into the console. Dear Daniel. She began, then stopped, blushing though no one was there to hear. She tried again. Daniel, it is Elira. I do not know if this will reach you. I do not know if you even remember me. But I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. I hope you are well. I hope you are safe. I hope you still look at the stars. She stopped, her voice trembling. The silence after her words was heavy, yet her heart beat faster. Still, fear held her back. What if he never heard? What if her words drifted forever in the void, unheard, unanswered? But she remembered what Daniel had once said. Humans send messages into the dark because they believe someone someday will hear. Belief. Humans did not stop because of silence. They hoped anyway. So she whispered to herself, I will hope too. One evening, she activated the transmitter. Her voice shook, but she pressed the button and spoke. Daniel, this is Elira. The words were small, but once spoken, they filled her heart with courage. I feel far away from you. I do not know how to reach you, but I wanted you to know I still remember. The garden, the stars, your words. I have carried them with me. They help me when the days are heavy. She paused, swallowing her fear. I do not know if this will ever find you, but I will keep speaking. I will keep trying. Because that is what you told me humans do. They do not give up. And if even one human can stand apart, then maybe I can too. Her hand shook as she ended the message. The transmitter hummed, carrying her words into the endless dark. For a moment, she simply sat there, tears sliding down her cheeks. But these were not tears of weakness. They were tears of release, of hope given voice. Days passed. No reply came, but Elira did not despair. Each night, she returned to the transmitter. She sent another message, sometimes short, sometimes long. Sometimes she shared her day, sometimes only a thought. The stars were bright tonight. I stood tall like you told me to. I believe we will meet again. And though silence always answered, she began to feel less alone. Because speaking into the void, she realized, was not just about being heard. It was about keeping hope alive. So the little alien princess kept sending her voice into the stars. She did not know if Daniel would ever hear. She did not know if Earth was listening, but she knew this. Across the galaxy, all alien males may have rejected her, but one human had stood apart. And because of that, she could believe in hope, even in silence. The transmitter hummed faintly. In the dark room, Elira sat before it once again, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She had spoken into it every night for weeks, her words drifting into the void. No reply came. Still, she kept speaking. Daniel, she whispered softly. Tonight the moon was bright. I thought of you again. Sometimes I feel so small here, but I remember your words. You told me small things can be strong. I try to believe that. She pressed the button, sent the message, and sat back. She felt distant, unbearably distant, but also stronger. Speaking gave her courage, even if silence was her only answer. The next morning, the palace was filled with unease. Voices rose in the council chamber. Sharp and panicked. Lyra entered quietly. Slipping into her seat. Her father sat on the high dais, his face hard. Generals and ministers surrounded him, their words spilling over each other. The raider fleets. Grow bolder, one shouted. Our border worlds are in danger, cried another. We must gather every ship, strike back with force. The room boiled with anger and fear. Lyra sat still, her hands trembling in her lap. She felt the weight of every voice, every demand. But as she listened, she also remembered the quiet stories Daniel had told her. How humans, when faced with storms at sea, did not always fight the waves. They learned to sail with them. How humans, when small against vast empires, did not surrender. They found clever ways to survive, to win. Small things can be strong. The words echoed in her heart. The council argued for hours. Generals demanded more soldiers, more weapons. Others feared the cost. Finally, her father spoke. His deep voice cut through the noise. We will strike, he said firmly. Force will meet force. The chamber murmured in agreement. Lyra's single quotes. Heart pounded. She wanted to speak, but fear gripped her. What if they laughed? What if they silenced her, as they always had? She closed her eyes and thought of Daniel, his steady gaze, his calm voice. Sometimes the smallest person carries the strongest strength. Breath trembled, and then she stood. The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to her. Lyra's single quotes voice was quiet, but it did not shake. Father, she said, there is another way. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Rarely did the little princess speak in council. Her father's eyes narrowed. Explain, she drew a breath. The raiders are strong in battle. We cannot match them ship for ship. But strength is not only in numbers. It is in foresight. They survive on stolen supplies. If we cut their lines, if we strike where they gather food and fuel, they will break without a fight. A murmur rose. Some scoffed. Some shook their heads. She is young. She does not understand war. This is foolish. Her chest tightened. But then she remembered humans again. Their history, their stubborn will. How they tried when the odds were impossible. How they refused to give up. She lifted her chin. You call me weak, she said, her voice clear. But weakness is not what I see. I see a different kind of strength. If we fight only with muscle, we may fall. But if we use our mind, our patience, our wit, we may win. I believe this. The chamber grew quiet. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then her father leaned back slowly in his chair. His eyes, once hard, softened just slightly. The plan is unusual, he said, but perhaps unusual is what we need. That evening, as the council dismissed, Halira walked alone through the starlit garden. Her heart still raced. For the first time she had spoken, and they had listened. She tilted her head back, gazing at the wide sky. Daniel, she whispered, I don't know if you'll ever hear me, but today I was brave because of you. The stars blinked silently, but she smiled. The plan was set in motion. Scouts and small ships moved quietly, striking not at the raider fleets themselves, but at their hidden caches. Outposts were emptied, supply depots burned, routes cut off. Weeks, the raiders grew desperate. Their great ships had no fuel, their soldiers no food. They fled before the Empire's fleets could even meet them in open battle. The Empire was saved without a great war, without rivers of blood. The court was stunned. And for the first time in her life, Halira walked into the council chamber not as the small, rejected princess, but as the one whose wisdom had guided them to victory. Whispers followed her. But this time, they were different. The palace was different now. After the raider fleets had been defeated, the whispers about Halira had changed. Where once they mocked her, Now they spoke with respect. Courtiers bowed deeper, generals listened more carefully, and even her father looked at her with new pride. But though the world around her shifted, her heart still felt heavy. She had won their respect, yes. But at night, when the halls were quiet and the stars shone through her window, she still felt the same emptiness, because respect was not the same as connection. And the one person who had made her feel understood the one human who had stood apart was still far away. Elia returned to the transmitter often. She sent messages into the stars, her voice calm but longing. Daniel, today, the people cheered for me. They called me wise. But when the voices faded, I only wished you could have heard them too. Daniel, I am stronger now. I speak, and they listen. But strength feels lonely without someone to share it with. Daniel, do you still look at your sky? If you do, know that I am looking too. Each night she waited, hoping against hope, for a reply, but the silence never broke. Still, she did not stop. Humans did not stop. They hoped, even in silence. And so would she. One evening, she walked through the gardens. The glowing flowers swayed gently in the night breeze, just as they had on the evening she had last spoken with Daniel years ago. Her heart ached with memory. She remembered his calm voice, his steady gaze. She whispered to the wind, "You are far, Daniel, but sometimes I feel you are near. Is that foolish?" The flowers swayed, silent, but she felt a strange comfort in their quiet dance. Perhaps hope itself was not foolish. Her new respect in the court gave her freedom she had never had before. She could now visit the star archives openly, ask questions, without being dismissed. So she asked, "What do we know of the human homeworld?" She inquired one afternoon, her voice steady. The archivists looked surprised, but answered. "Earth," they said. "A small blue planet near the edge of known. Space, resourceful, stubborn people. Not the most advanced, but not to be underestimated." Elira listened carefully, her heart beating fast. So small, and yet it was where Daniel came from. So small, and yet his people carried such hope. She wanted to know more. Night after night, she studied the archives. She read about human history stories, of explorers who crossed oceans, of climbers who scaled impossible mountains, of families who sent letters across seas, waiting months or years for replies. Humans were always reaching, always believing that distance could be crossed. If they could do it, she whispered to herself, then so can I. But how? She still did not know. Days turned into weeks. She grew busier, guiding counsels, advising her father. Yet even in her new strength, loneliness clung to her. The respect of many could not replace the understanding of one. Sometimes she feared she was reaching into a void, that Daniel would never hear her, never remember. But then she remembered something else he had told her. Humans believe even when they have no proof. They believe because hope itself is worth carrying. So she kept writing. Her letters now filled 2 boxes. Dear Daniel, I spoke in council again today. My father listened without question. Dear Daniel, I still feel far from you, but when I look at Earth on the map, it does not feel as far. Dear Daniel, maybe one day you will read these. If not, then let the stars keep them safe. She wrote each night by the glow of a single lamp, her words quiet but full of longing. And though her heart ached, she felt stronger with each letter. One evening, after finishing her letter, she carried the box to the transmitter room. She placed the letters on the console, touching them gently. Daniel, she whispered, I cannot send these, not yet. But they are here, they are real, and so is my hope. Then she pressed the button and spoke again. Tonight I feel very far from you. I do not know how to reach you, but I will not stop trying, because humans taught me that trying is never wasted. Even if silence is all I hear, I will keep speaking. She ended the message and sat back, closing her eyes. And in the quiet hum of the transmitter, she felt a strange peace. The next day, as she walked through the palace, she overheard two courtiers speaking. The princess has changed, one said. Yes, said the other. She carries herself differently now, almost as though she believes in something we cannot see. Elira smiled faintly as she passed them. They could not see, but she knew. She believed in hope. She believed in the human who once stood apart. That night, as she stood by her window, gazing at the stars, she whispered one last time. Double quotes Daniel. I don't know if you hear me. I don't know if you remember me, but I remember you. And that is enough to keep me walking forward. She pressed her hand to the glass, the stars reflecting in her eyes. Across the galaxy, all alien males may have rejected her, but one human stood apart. And because of that, she could still hope. The palace was alive with celebration. Banners hung from the walls. Musicians played in the courtyards, and nobles filled the halls with their laughter. The great council had named Elira Voice of the Stars, a new title that honored her wisdom and courage. Yet, though the lights shone bright, Elira's heart felt dim. As she smiled politely at the nobles and listened to their praise, she felt only one thought repeating inside her: Colon Daniel should be here. That night, when the last guest had gone and the halls grew quiet again, she returned to the transmitter room. She placed her newest letter on the console and pressed the button to record her message. Daniel, she whispered, today they gave me a title. They finally see me. But I would trade all their titles, all their respect, if it meant hearing your voice once more. She paused, her throat tight. Sometimes I fear I am speaking to an empty sky. But still I speak, because that is what you taught me humans do. They believe even when silence answers. So I will keep believing. She ended the message and leaned back, closing her eyes. But tonight, unlike all the nights before, something changed. The console flickered. Just for a moment, a faint pulse of light blinked on the screen. Elira froze, her breath caught in her throat. Was it a mistake? A glitch? Or was it something else? She leaned forward, pressing the buttons, trying to stabilize the signal. For a heartbeat, she thought she heard a sound, a faint crackle, almost like a voice trying to reach through the static of the stars. Hell, then. It was gone. The screen went dark again. Elira sat frozen, her heart racing. Had she imagined it? Her hands trembled as she pressed the console again, replaying the sequence. The flicker returned. The faint crackle returned. This was no mistake. Something was trying to reach her. She leaned close, whispering desperately, Daniel, is that you? No reply. Only silence. Yet even silence felt different now, because silence had shifted. For the first time in years, Elira felt hope rise in her chest, like a flame catching fire. The connection was faint, broken, almost nothing. But almost nothing was more than she had ever had before. She laughed softly, tears slipping down her cheeks. You're out there, she whispered. You're really out there. The next days were restless. She could hardly focus on the councils or the endless greetings. Her thoughts always returned to the console, to that faint pulse of light. Each night she returned, recording her words, waiting for a flicker in reply. Sometimes the light came. Sometimes it did not. But each time it did. Her hope grew stronger. The archivists noticed her change. Princess, you seem distracted, one said gently. Yes, another added. Your eyes look brighter, as though you have seen something the rest of us cannot. Elira smiled faintly, but said nothing. Some things were too precious to share. One evening, as she sent another message, she thought of the human stories she had read. The explorers who set sail across oceans, not knowing if land waited on the other side. The families who wrote letters for years before replies returned. Humans believed in connection, even when it seemed impossible. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Daniel, if you hear me, even faintly, know that I am still here. I will always be here, because hope is stronger than silence." She began to dream differently before. Her dreams had been filled with empty halls and endless stars. Now they carried flashes of sound like footsteps, like laughter, like a voice half hidden by static. She would wake with her heart racing, convinced she was on the edge of hearing him again. The distance between them still hurt, but it hurt less now, because she no longer felt like she was reaching into nothing. She was reaching into something. One night, as she watched the stars from her window, her hand pressed to the glass, she whispered a promise. "I don't know how to bring you here. I don't know how to reach you fully, but I will not give up. I will keep speaking until the stars themselves carry my words to you." She smiled softly, her tears falling not in sorrow but in hope, because across the galaxy, every other voice may have rejected me, but yours is the one I still wait for, the one I still believe in. As she turned back to her desk, she saw her growing stack of letters. 2 boxes were already full, and a third was halfway there. She touched them gently. "These are my bridges," she whispered, "and one day they will reach you." Then, as if in answer, the console flickered again. The light pulsed, faint but steady this time. Lyra gasped, rushing to the screen, and through the static, she heard it so faint, she thought her heart might burst from the effort of hearing. "Eli." "Ra." The voice was broken, small, almost swallowed by noise, but it was a voice, and it was his. She pressed her hand to the console, her tears falling.